C'est ça, oui, oui. Et si vous voulez... Non, mais je comprends le... Buonasera, benvenuti.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting, which I hope you've noticed insists on the fundamental issue of this meeting's edition, i.e., if we want an further deepening after the wonderful presentation by Professor Esposito on the main subject of the meeting. The reason of this deeper look on the subject is twofold. On the one hand, we are realizing it now, the subject of certainty, of what is actually making life move is, as Professor Costantino Esposito said, is a primordial subject. It is indeed an all-fundamental issue. The thing is that in the public arena, in the cultural debate, we usually prefer to go on presenting the word certainty as if with a negative connotation, as if it were a source of intolerance, of closing off, a cause of immobilization, if not a confrontation. If you're patient enough to go through the papers, you probably understood certain hints. I'm not going to dwell on them at the moment, but you probably realize that what is happening here, that is, the sheer evidence that man with certainties not only are meeting up together and not just formally but really have an in-depth meeting, but at this meeting also gives new thrust to a history, to plans, to an innovative perspective. Think, for example, about the meeting we had 3 days ago with some of the more important representatives of the important change in Egypt. Think about the meeting that we had with the Anglicans, with the Orthodox. Think about the most moving meeting we had yesterday between Professor Weiler and Professor Gabajosa. And think about the presence last year of Mr. Marchione. Think about El Khan this year. Think about the first day at the meeting this year with the President of the Italian Republic. This may look like a wonderful and not lasting exception, or perhaps is it all pointing out to a direction, to a process which is useful in the life of each and everybody of us, in the life of the person who are dear to us, and in the life of the people. Today we'd like to go back to the subject, and by the way, I wish to refer to you to the very intriguing adjective that is matching now the noun certainty, inevitable. This is the adjective. Even those who maintain that doubt is their profession of life or their job, as it were, to be uncertain are at least certain of their uncertainties. Professor Costantino was referring to this primordial experience. And most importantly, I'd like to recall one of the sentences in his lecture referring to some dynamism that according to some, not just here, but here more than in other places, when faced with the attempt by man to establish their own certainties, there's an attempt to flee away from the inexorabilities of time to the inevitability of things that end up prevailing over fear. And I am like to quote Costantino Esposito's sentence when he said that certainty is not something that, first of all, we build up. It is, in fact, something that, first of all, is given to us. Certainty is something that generates us. Certainty is something that, as such, can become ours as it generates us. Now, to take us along this process so as to better explain this very dramatic adjective, inevitable certainty, we have invited a friend of the meeting. Indeed, he's been coming to the meeting for a number of years now. So we've asked this friend to help us through this process. Many of you are familiar with Professor Fabrice Hadjadj. He's very young, he's in his 40s, and he's one of the top-ranking intellectuals in France, and not just that. He works at Figaro Littéraire, at Press, and he has a chair of philosophy and literature at the private high school. So he's not an academic, he's not a university professor, in fact. But he is somebody who is very intelligent, who perfectly knows what the reality is. He knows about that wisdom, that taste for life, that passion for life, that strength of the movement, the rational that we all need. I'd like to give him the floor straight away, thanking him most warmly for coming here. Thank you.
Je voulais remercier spécialement tous les.
I would like to thank all the friends of the meeting who offered me the honor to be invited here also this year. I hope I will be able to say something of interest to you. This is not because I am a skillful person, this is so because they trust me. And they saw that God is trusting me so much that I could not abandon them. I also would like to thank Ugo Moschella, my dear friend, who is here and who has translated my paper into Italian, so my words will be his words. I also would like to thank Mr. Mirko Iadarola, who is speaking. And my voice will be his voice. There is a word which is at the heart of the meeting of this year and which is also in the title of my presentation. It's a strong word without hesitations. Furthermore, it is usually associated with some adjectives which make it even stronger, such as immense, inevitable. I'm referring to the term certainty. something which might scare you, which is not trendy. And hence that further stressed the importance of immense certainty or inevitable certainty would mean becoming enemies of those who like doubts, relativism and opinion polls. But these people are not totally wrong. On the one hand, we live at a time of uncertainties. Today, more than ever, we ignore our future, and we're not even sure that we can have a future. On the other hand, the ideological certainties of the 20th century showed that they were totalitarian in nature. They destroyed liberty and organized the slaughtering of people. Therefore, a man full of certainties appears like a person who is stiff because of intolerance and pride. Even worse, it looks like a dead person. A man who is certain about something is a person who has no doubts and rejects any discussion on the subject. So it becomes sort of a mountain which cannot be destroyed by anyone. So when we speak of certainty, we generally think of minerals or stones or something which is static, not moving. So what is lively is not a mineral, because what is lively is something which changes, opens up to continuous exchange with the outer world. And through the exchanges, it gets adapted and modifies continually. So life is on the side of breathing and water. It's fresh, cannot be grasped, it's fluent, brilliant and stable, like the woman, according to the Duke of Mountain. The woman is fickle.
Serait plutôt comparable à la
Certainty is something which might rather well compared to Medusa. Blocking the breathing makes the water freeze. It crystallizes us in a single position, where, on the contrary, the real true living being, as Luigi Pirandello, writing 100,000, states that the true living person is someone who has no definite identity, and it never stops dying and being rebirthed. And I quote, yes, yes, of course, my dear, think of that. 1 minute ago, before this happened to you, you were another person. You were 100,000 others. And this should not surprise you. Just tell me, do you think you are so sure that tomorrow you'll be what you say you are today? That's why certainty is, in a sort of way, a triple course. It's obsolete. This is the time of uncertainty. It is dangerous, for it generates totalitarianism, and it's lethal because it turns our heart made of flesh in a heart made of stone. In summary, certainty is uncertain, and this is safe. This is certain. I repeat the same sentence. Certainty is uncertain. This is certain. So what? Did I say something strong, strange? No, I simply said something which is absurd. This absurdity is called skepticism or relativism. It consists in saying there is no certainty, this is the only certainty, or to everyone their own certainties. This is the certainty which should be applied to all. So certainty is inevitable. Without certainties, we would never be able to make a single step. Indeed, certainty is unavoidable, is inevitable. We can discuss in theory about the role of certainty or question that. For example, we might be skeptical or adopt relativism. But when we speak about existence, things are different. For example, I have a certainty, I am sure that I am not Silvio Berlusconi. I'm also certain that my audience is not composed only by chicken. I say not only because I'm not sure, maybe there is a hen that you brought here while hiding it. In the end, I'm certain that I exist. So we should shift the system of mineral or stone images that we have associated with certainty. So certainty indeed is good that it is referred to solidity, but solidity does not mean petrification. It means the soil or the land on which we walk and which allows us to progress. So what Stephen's life is not certainty, it's a doubt. Just think for a single moment that you seriously doubt of my ability as a speaker, and you might think that I am a Norwegian killer on the verge of shooting you. So you would not be able to follow our thinking. Aristotle makes this shift of images associating the doubt to something which puts you in chains and stating that certainty is something which makes you free. He writes, those who ignore that they are being strangled, they cannot remove the rope. Those who have the feet in a chain cannot walk. Those who have doubts, because their spirit is in chains, how can the person go along the road of contemplation? And hence, those who would like to remove the rope, well, in order to do that, they have to understand how the rope is tied. At the same time, those who are looking for answers to their doubts, they should first of all understand the difficulties that they are experiencing. Uncertainty is not an end, for uncertainty is the true petrification. A person who is uncertain about the solidity of a bridge would never dare crossing it. They will stop before the bridge. So those who are skeptical, they are usually conformist in the practice. They criticize everything. But since they have no certainty allowing them to make their life free, they will change nothing. This is a typical phenomenon of our days. And just think of what the French thinker Guy Debord calls the society of entertainment. The society of entertainment criticizes itself. They make a show to cheat politicians who are showing off. But in that way, they never go out of the world of entertainment. It gets increasingly entangled in that. So is it certainty that makes us move? Well, the answer is yes, but what about the risk of being arrogant? So certainty is something which helps us to go on, but maybe that soil is might be the concrete road on which we have our tanks pass. So that was the ideological certainty of communism and Nazism. But the real certainty is the opposite of self-suggestion. The real certainty is not based on an inner feeling, something which is only subjective or collective. For as our sentiments are continually changing, this certainty will immediately become uncertain. For example, a man sees a very beautiful woman and tells her, "I love you forever." He is convinced of that in that moment. So he is convinced that that is a certainty, but indeed that solidity is something which is below his belt and which will soften up in the end. Yes, he will love her forever. Yes, but for just one night. If he wants to love her more till the death, will have to rest on something else, on someone who has really loved till death. So the real certainty cannot be based on an objective evidence. Evidence is something which we have not decided, which we have not construed, which was given to us and which we see very clearly. In French we say qui crève les yeux, piercing your eyes, as if to say that evidence is not there to flatter us.
Nous blesser et bouleverser nos plans.
It is there to completely change our plans. So we can really understand the meaning of the term unavoidable in the title of this conference and the term immense in the title of the meeting. Let's talk about inevitable or unavoidable first. Saying that something is not avoidable is that we cannot avoid it. So that might be suggestive of the fact that we might be tempted to avoid that thing that we want to run away, because we are scared by it. So an unavoidable certainty indicates a certainty that we would avoid, but we cannot do that. We would like to avoid its presence, but we cannot do that. So if we want to avoid it, this is because we are scared by it in a way or the other, but as it is inevitable, we will have to face it sooner or later. It is as if we had a sort of time bomb in us. We can deny that we hear it's ticking because it is confused with the beat of the heart, but in the end the bomb will blast. We might hear a little click of the fuse just before the blasting. It will simply last a quarter of a second, but that time, for those who are not ready, risk to become long and desolating for the eternity. What is it scaring in this unavoidable uncertainty? It is the fact that it flees, escapes our power. Confronted with the unavoidable certainty, we are powerless. As St. Paul states in the second letter to the Corinthians, we have no power against truth. This lack of power is a curse for those who are proud. It's a blessing for those who are humble. For that lack of power is not paralyzing by itself. It opens up to a higher power and delivers us to something or someone we were not expecting and which goes beyond us. This lack of power is an escape from the logic of competition and a way to enter in the logics of communion. It's not that we have to be stronger to prevail over others. We have to be with the others in opening us to someone who is stronger than us all and which overcomes us all. And let's consider the second adjective, immense. Saying that certainty is immense means that is bigger than we are. It is stating that it goes well beyond our dimension. It's not me grasping that certainty, it's her which grasps me. It's not. I'm not possessing the certainty. It is the certainty which possesses me and all the others. And since it's bigger than I am, it's not comfortable. It's, on the contrary, something which can tear my heart. You might be wondering, what is this certainty, and when will he speak about modernity? This isn't the title of your conference. Indeed, I'm doing that immediately. Then we'll go back to the certainty we were trying to define before. But this forward was necessary because before my title, well, we have to consider the title of the meeting. And I want to speak about modernity in this framework. So the title of the meeting is not just a banner. Is not a gimmick made by marketing specialists. It's not the slogan of a movement called the Comunione e Liberazione. This title is a sentence which contains the event of a call. It calls us, it calls you in the midst of the uncertainties of our time. Indeed, I need to evoke the uncertainties of this time. Indeed, starting from the original sin, all times have been uncertain. And I think that saying that we were better before is just a delusion. But this time is characterized by a specific uncertainty which corresponds to the end of modern times, and we can call the collapse of the age of progress or death of humanism. Modern times could proclaim God is dead and be happy of the kingdom of man. But this is over, and now we wake up in a hangover. Now we have the impression that we have to say, the man, with a capital M, the man is dead. Modernity started under the sign of humanism. Even if this is not clearly indicated by its name, modernus in Latin means recent. This is the negative aspect of modernity, i.e. the breaking with the ancients or the tradition of the past. The problem is that by simply worshipping what is of the present time, modernity can only maim itself and just become a fashion or a trend. Fashion, or what is trendy, is a flimsy novelty. What used to be fashionable today is now obsolete. As a matter of fact, in fashion there is never something which is absolutely new. So the absolute novelty is still and always new. It's a gushing spring which dazzles us. On the contrary, fashion is the cult of what is obsolete. For example, I'm sure you have an iPhone 4 or 5 in your hands. This is a future fossil. If you have a cross or a thread of beads, well, that will never be outdated. Modernity does not mean only breaking with the past. It contains two positive elements: looking towards the future and the centrality of man. The ancients were not looking at the future. They were thinking of a happy past and the age of gold. They were not centered on human beings. They were centered on nature, on the universe and the gods. So where does modernity comes from? Where does its strange faith in a man and in the future comes? Indeed, that is born out of the Christianity. modernity seems to be anti-Christian, but as a matter of fact, it has deep Christian roots. It also rehearsed Christian ideas to use them against Christendom. It's like when you take away a rose in a garden, put it in a nice vase for a certain period of time, it remains isolated, enhanced, and it appears more neat, more straight, more beautiful, and you can feel its perfume in the house. But it soon withers. The water gets turbid, and the atmosphere is filled by a rotten smell. And this happens also with modernity. It isolates some data of the Christian faith, separating them from God. History, salvation, freedom, communion, all things which were taken by communism, for example, but they are already horizontal values which can be achieved through man's work. That might impress us for a certain period of time, and then the bad odor diffuses. This transfer is clearly perceived, i.e. from Christianity to modernity, is clearly perceived in a character by Pasternak, Uncle Collier, at the beginning of Dr. Zivagos. And I choose Pasternak because there is an exhibition on him at the meeting. Uncle Collier is a writer between two ages. His writings are defined Christian, but they are also at the same time close to the Bolshevik Revolution. I'll quote a very long passage, and I quote, "One can be atheist or not know whether God exists and why. At the same time, you can be aware that human beings do not live in nature, they live in history. And this history was founded by Christ, and the gospel is its foundation. But what is history? It's trying to solve the mystery of death and win it one day. So the concept of infinite is discovered in mathematics. Electromagnetic waves are discovered. Symphonies are written. But to make such discoveries, you have to be spiritually endowed. And to that end, all data are in the gospel. First of all, the love for your neighbor, the supreme form of living energy filling the heart of man, which needs to expand and be used. Then the main element of today's man, without which a man cannot be even conceived, i.e. freedom of the individuals and life as a sacrifice. So the ancient people had no history in this sense. This is one of the most important passages. It refers to the Jewish and Christian notions of history, love of the neighbor, freedom of the person, sacrifice as an accomplishment to separate them from their supernatural spring. Love for the neighbor, for example, is no longer based on its vocation to eternal life. It's an evolved form of living energy. Sacrifice is no longer an offering and a communion in God. Is the possibility to die for future generations. Immortality means being present in others, thanks to nice actions which are memorable. That presupposes that there are other persons on the earth who might remember us in the future. So modernity, which is generous, is based on the trust in progress. It promotes a certainty which is tailored to our dimension. We are certain of our power, we are certain that human beings, with their own forces, can establish a kingdom of justice and peace through science and the arts, thereby winning death. But this ideological certainty has collapsed. We have not been defeating death. As Uncle Collier dreamt, we multiplied death. We were not able to understand its mystery. The mystery is even thicker, and we are now in full darkness. Three names are enough to demonstrate that: Colima, Auschwitz, Hiroshima. Our generation no longer believes in political or aesthetic utopias, for we have seen the result of their slaughters. Then we have under our eyes the practical possibility to completely disappear from the planet. The essay writer and novel writer Arthur Koestler wrote in 1979, and I quote, "If I were asked what is the most important date in history and in prehistory of human beings, I would answer August the 6th, 1945. Since the day the first atomic bomb was eclipsing the sun or making the sun disappear in Hiroshima, it's humanity as a whole which should be fearful to disappear as a species from the herd. The most important date of the history is no longer a glorious event, it's the event of a destruction. So humanity is no longer living in the perspective of progress. It has to face the risk of disappearing from the planet. This is the post-modern uncertainty which followed the certainty of modernities. And this uncertainty is so big that it is also an unavoidable certainty. Not only individuals, not only civilization, but the whole mankind can die. So if the anxiety against the death of the single person provokes the escape from enjoyment, so the anxiety of being collectively at risk of dying all will become a monster for us. The young people know that very well. It's useless to speak about work, professions of the future, social success. That is meaningless for them. Our beautiful bourgeois projects have no meaning to their eyes. They need easy success, easy money, easy ecstasies, bingo for bonga bonga, because they feel that we have no longer the necessary time to have a future. The dilated, the long times, the role of politics and culture offer no guarantees. In the past, we could do something for posterity. An artist could improve its work being not understood, believing that he would have understood in the next century. Boss could decide to sacrifice, as Uncle Collier wanted, to build a better world. But we are not even certain that there will be a world in the future. The time of heroes is over, for heroism presupposes remembering posterity. Thetis, the mother of Achilles, let his son choose between a short, violent and glorious life and a long, pacific but dark life. The alternative of Thetis is nowadays no longer possible. We no longer have a sufficiently safe future. Our memory is not sufficiently long to have heroes. We can simply accept the mere glory of stars does not survive zapping or the third season and the programming of a TV. the calls to a new humanism will be useless. The same goes for the nostalgia to go back to the tradition of the ancients. Renewed progressivism and refound traditionalism are just screens posed in front of a precipice to make people understand that we are running towards a real house. So modernity will only be post-humanistic. This can only take up three shapes which are opposed one to the others. So when we denounce the mistake of one of these, we are pushed to fall in the mistake of the other. The devil works like that, always. He knows truth is not entangled in the errors which he proposes to us as stupid beings. That's why he continues to invent different errors. He stimulates adversaries and plays on all sides of the table. In the past, we had communism and capitalism facing each other's, denouncing each other's mutually. Now we have three other things which could be involved: technicism, ecologism, and fundamentalism. There are three ways to abandon man with a capital M. Either we go towards the Superman, and this is technicism, or we try to go back to nature, and this is ecologism, the defense of the environment. Or we preach the importance of dissolving in God, and that is fundamentalism. These are three ways to abandon the man, at the same time abandoning history, i.e. the long times, the duration of the true culture and the true politics. So either we decide to do what those who like technology do, i.e. looking for happiness in a double click, or we go back to the cycles of nature. And this is what environmentalists do, and they love looking at monkeys living on the trees. Or we look for the ecstasies in the other world. And this is what the fundamentalist does, accepting a God which is irrational. In the three cases, we are started from the very same basis. The risk that a human being will be cancelled from the earth in the future. Technicism would avert that disappearance by stating that there is a mutation underway. They say, yes, the Homo sapiens sapiens is outdated, but will bring something which will resist radiations, and we can fly to other galaxies. Environmentalism would prevent this disappearance by going back to nature, saying, yes, man, the supreme predator, is doomed to disappear, but they will do that only to enter into the womb of Mother Nature and relive through flowers and birds. Fundamentalism will dissipate this disappearance through the enlightenment of pure spiritualism, saying, yes, the historical man devoted to the flesh can only disappear because what is essential in us is not flesh or history, it's spirit. These slogans can be interpreted in different ways, and there is an abyss between soft fundamentalism, a Buddhist state, and a strong fundamentalism like Islam.
In between, we could have some evangelic fundamentalism. What is important is that in the three cases, you get away from what is human and from what is historic with cultural and political creativity. Now, even without being believers, you can make quite a straightforward observation. As modernity would include certain Judaic and Christian elements to use them against the Church with the incarnate Logos. Likewise, postmodernity, with these three different avatars, seem to dislocate the revelation from the incarnate Logos. What Chesterton said about the modern world can be said to the postmodern world as well. And I quote, "Postmodern world is full of crazy ancient Christian virtues. This is not a judgment of faith, but this is just a judgment and opinion of reason. Christianity preaches incarnate Logos, preaches the agreement between faith and reason, of nature and supernatural, of flesh and spirit. And now we find basically the bits and pieces of that agreement as if they were member disjecta, monstrous on the cut head there, beastly body over there, and yet beyond heart and tear in pieces. Modernity would consist in making completely immanent and anthropocentric the Christian hope. Postmodernity lies with proposing false transcendences and transhumana, which is false, to go back to the neologism that was formed by Dante. Technique in itself is not bad or wicked. In fact, right from the origin, the God of the Bible, of the book, orders to prevail over the earth and to have it subjected to it. But technicism interpret that prevailing not as a way to welcome and prolong the natural figure in an action of grace, but rather as the pride to exploit it and deform it according to our whims. Likewise, environmental protection is not an evil in itself. As a matter of fact, man is indeed called upon in Psalms as well to praise the Lord and the Eternal for all the creation, from the stone to the angel, from the ant to the Holy Mary. But the environmentalism interpret this praise as a regression to the wilderness, as if we were to bray with the donkeys and dance with the wolves. As a matter of fact, religion is not an evil in itself, obviously, but fundamentalism, rather than seeing the radical flourishing on all what is human, instead of acknowledging that grace doesn't destroy human nature, makes God similar to an idol that presses everything and disempowers us. So Logos detaches Logos from divine and turns it against the flesh as we are given it. Environmentalism detaches our flesh from Logos, thus reducing the divine to a material and impersonal nature. Fundamentalism detaches the divine from Logos and flesh and imposes to both servile subjection rather than filial exaltation. I'd like to reiterate that. When faced with the modern dislocation, every sensible man is forced to acknowledge the wonderful balance of the revelation of God in incarnate Logos. This doesn't mean that man should believe in that. It could be the most beautiful brain construction that mankind can reach. This may simply mean that though being a misbeliever, men should at least have a certainty that this revelation is allied to man and it is in the order of reality. But obviously, this requires that this man is still interested to what man is and to the reality is as we were given them. So, it is not all bad what we have at this time of the announced vanification. The time is certainly tragic, no doubt, but the tragedy awakens our dignity, that of a vertical tear crying out to the heaven, and that of a supernatural charity, which is as strong as death. I'm thinking about the last words of the Electra by Jean Girardot. A woman is asking in the midst of the disaster, how do you call this? When you would raise in the day as today, when everything is ruined, when everything is sacked, and when still you can breathe the air, and you've lost it all, and the city is burning, and the innocents are killing among themselves, but with the culprits agonizing in a corner of the day. And the beggar would answer, this has a very beautiful name, Narcisse. This is called the dawn of the day. In the night of the time, we are called upon for another dawn of the day. The destruction of mundane hopes gives us the opportunity to cross the aspiration and to open up more deeply to the theological hope. It is not a flight, a way towards a transcendence that discredits the earth. As fundamentalism, it is indeed a mission to shed light on the earth, not because of utopia, but because of our hope in what is eternal. I often repeat that if I were to be told that in December 2012 the end of the world will take place, well, this wouldn't prevent me to have a child in November and to write poems and to plant a tree. Because I don't do this just for my earthly life. I do them because this is a way I'm involved in eternal life as well.
Je songe aussi à une parole du génie.
I'm thinking about a sentence by a wonderful pianist and composer, Franz Liszt, that we're celebrating this year. He was born 200 years ago. In a letter to the Countess Maria de Gaulle, the woman he loves, he wrote, if we don't get to happiness, it is perhaps because we're worth it more than that. There's too much energy, too much passion, too much fire in our body to adjust as bourgeois in what is just but possible. Well, these words are pretty ambiguous, so much so because Franz Liszt is writing them to a married woman with whom he's going to flee. But behind this passion, there's another more radical meaning that refers to another true high passion, the passion of Christ. The cross stands in the horizon to tell us that we'll never get to happiness, but also to tell us that we're worth it more than happiness, as we're made not just for well-being, but to be good, not for the comfort of contentness, but for the piercing joy of offering oneself. Perhaps you know Franz Liszt had placed his whole life under the protection of the thief. Well, you know what the story of the thief is. Well, he was the one who did it all to flee from good, to flee from God, and actually he succeeds in doing that because he's a wrongdoer, and this is what the Gospels say. This is the word of God itself that defines him as a wrongdoer. And so you find it in the abyss, on the top of the Calvary, crucified, blasphemous, desperate. But in that place, who's just to his left? In the deepest angst, who's next to his heart? Yes. All his wandering is used to have him right next to the right of God, to the right of Jesus. And this poor man, this thief that have done all he could to go deep in hell, becomes indeed the first to go to heaven. I always talk about this upsetting, stating that God is never placing us on the right way forward. No, he's never setting us on the right way forward. Why is that? Well, because he uses our turns, our mistakes, our wanderings, our deviations to create a new way forward, the unique way forward for each of us, which is just our own. Redemption is not so much a going back to a previous situation, towards any earthly paradise before death and sin. It requires the experience of sin and death towards a higher joy, as St. Paul would say, where sin increased, grace increased all the more. And what I've just said leads me to my conclusion and enables me to establish a link between the first and the second part of this lecture. After the disruption of modern certainty, in the midst of postmodern uncertainty, which is linked to the awareness of the very likely disappearance of the human species, what is the immense certainty that we are left with? If our faith is only based on an ideology, well then it cannot withstand, it cannot hold true. Don Giussani had understood it quite well. This is why he would say that anybody should restart from his or her own more tangible experience. And that's why he would say that anybody should start from the very simple fact that we exist. And here it comes, the immense certainty. There is something. It's not nothing. I am here. You are here. And before our eyes, we have this simple truth that are mysterious for the very fact that I'm here, just before you. We see this table, this glass, these lamps, and especially outside the bright daylight. So we start to go back to this evidence of existence. We have to go back to this certainty of our present life. Dr. Zhivago reminds us of that in the book by Pasternak. The revolutionaries, Zhivago says, talk about a better future, whereas we have to live today. They talk about a radius future, whereas we have to find today the source of the song. The construction of new worlds, the times of transition are the end, the objective of the revolutionaries, and that is an end in itself. They haven't learned anything else. They don't know anything else, and it is quite derives from this lack of precise skills. They have no skills. Man to live, not to get ready for life. Is born. Man is born to full life. And the phenomenon of life, the gift of life, are something that is so important, so fascinating, so exciting. Why should we exchange it with the childish idea of immature innovations? But what is this fascination? What is this seriousness of life? What is that inevitable and immense certainty of existence? And how can it dissipate the immature innovation of moderns and postmoderns? The word existence describes an experience. This is what the message by Benedict XVI was saying in his address to the meeting here. Ex sister implies to stay out, in that it means that we come away from something and that we go towards. What is the fundamental fact to which this very simple word corresponds? To the fact that I am, and that I couldn't give life by myself. I couldn't give my existence by myself. I'm not the origin. I'm not the end of my being. I didn't create myself by myself. I received existence from somebody else, and I received it to give it over to somebody else. My imperfect being knows that it will grow up to a mature age. What is mature age? There are those who believe that that can be achieved when you are 18, or because you are self-sufficient economically, or because you should become responsible in that maybe you can have some savings in the bank, or you have a retirement wage. But why do you think that you are mature when you can go sleep with girls? Aristotle would say that a human being develops and grows, and that consists with the principle of generating. So you are mature when you can hand over life to somebody else, when you can give life to somebody else. Here's the certainty that we haven't chosen, but which is self-imposed. Our existence is something that has been given to us and that we have to accomplish, giving ourselves. But whom did we get it from? What is my origin over and above my parents? Am I just the result of chance and matter? Is it possible just shaking atoms to create, for example, a digital camera or something even more complicated than a digital camera, i.e. the human eye? Well, chance, by definition, never destroy what it does, and the spirit cannot be released out of matter. At least you believe that matter itself is intelligent and even more intelligent than our engineers. And yet, at the very time when I understand that my origin cannot just reside in matter, but that it also resides in the greater spirit than myself, that is better than mine, well then I cannot apprehend and understand my end. Indeed, what's the point of being given the gift of life if it is just to die? If I were just but matter, my dissolution would be something normal, and this is what materialists attempt to show. They try and persuade us that death is no scandal. So they say, the face of the girl you used to love would decompose, it would be eaten up by worms, would be reduced in ashes. And this is just but normal, because that face was just an accident, a chance of matter. And the only long-lasting truth is that everything is decomposed in elementary particles. You know, you find reassurance wherever you can, because it's obvious that such materialists are only trying to be self-reassured. It is obvious that they try and ignore the very scandal of death, hiding what is tragic in our life. Our stance is exactly the opposite if compared to that of the spiritualists, but aims at the very same result. Spirituals, in fact, maintain that death is nothing, because we're just a spirit locked in bodies, and separation from our soul from the body is just but a liberation. No, both spiritualists and materialists are just hiding them, because the separation between soul and body is a painful laceration. It has an element of tragedy. And I'm not just talking about material death, I'm also talking about spiritual life, of that spiritual suicide, which is the sin that tears away our soul from its roots. What happens then? At a time when I realize that my existence is a gift, I also realize that it is a tragedy. I understand that my existence is the result of a gift from a generous creator, but that creates another darkness. Why is that this generous creator allows for evil to exist? Why are there so many injustices and pain and death? Why is he abandoning me in such a darkness? Well, we could state things differently. Maturity, mature age, we just said, implies being able to give life. It is basically a body maturity corresponding to the time when adolescence is over. But we are not just bodies. Indeed, we're also spiritual beings. We have reason. Man does not just give life following an instinct as an animal. Indeed, there are reasons to give life. What is wonderful about that time is that there are no half reasons being admitted anymore. In modern times, at a time of progressism, you could have birth policies. For example, you could have children being born to support the Reich or for the party, or just to have the memory of mankind being perpetuated. But in our postmodern time, this era of generalized catastrophism, all these birth policies basically are torn asunder. All temporary reasons to give birth apparently do not hold water, since we know that there is death that doesn't leave any trace behind. We are faced with the only possibility to face collective extinction. And so we would just have children to feed such a tragedy. Why should we have labours to give birth if it were just to create ashes for the future? That would be basically the kingdom of the black hole, with the victory of lack of meaning. At the same time, if we don't have the possibility to have children, well, we become ourselves the main players in this destruction, and we're involved in what a number of demographers call the suicide of Europe. You see the terrible mystery. I am made to give life, physical life and moral life as well. But I don't understand clearly the reasons why I should give life. It is a bit as if there were a wound in my being. My being is given to me so that I could give life to other beings. But now the reason of this gift is not clearly understood. And this is certainly normal, because if reason were given immediately, if I could immediately understand, if we didn't have to think things over, we would be just like beasts and animals. We would just make children following the instinct. What is anomalous is that even after speculation, the reason to give life seems to be hidden to our sight and to overcome our strengths. Where can we find the spiritual maturity enabling us to confirm my body maturity? The idea that we are here and that we're going to vanish is forcing us to accelerate the very vanishing of our existence. With this set of corpses that would be caused by the fact that we do not accept life and that we want to live behind a desert world with nobody else. Well, we have to look for a higher reason in giving birth in a more divine, more gratuitous way. In raising this question, I cannot but think to the Jewish answer, to that answer which is both carnal and spiritual, to that answer that basically connects what is below the belt and what is higher up in the skies. I'm talking about circumcision. Jewish in writing their sex, the divine promise. A ring of flesh is removed, and this part of flesh which is removed is a sign of their alliance with God. This sign is there to give them the spiritual maturity that corresponds to their body, to the carnal maturity. Even in the Phil camp, when children are thrown in the river, the Jew would see this mark on his sex, and this sign is encouraging him. Even if the horizon is barred, don't become accomplice of death, but just work for life, because you're not doing that for the horizon, and you're doing that for the vertical. You are giving life to a child, not for him to become a little pharaoh, but because he may live eternally as a child of God. And what happens to parents of Moses? This is what happens to the parents of Moses. They have this child that everybody seemed to condemn, this child which is to be
Le temps est
drowned. But he's going to be rescued from the water, and he become the one who's going to free his people. The horizon was barred. It looked as if it were a time of catastrophe, but the new horizon was open. Circumcision is a scar which is made following the image of the stigmas of the resurrector. It is a wound that leaves light go through. This is the immense and inevitable certainty of the existence. I was given life, and this gift requires a hope that goes beyond this world, crossing darkness. Why this darkness, you might ask? Well, could I answer this question about the darkness? Well, the darkness wouldn't be such. What I can just have an insight about is that this darkness is not just a lack of light. It is also the possibility to be involved in the work of light. God, in his generosity, is not just willing to give us a way forward. Indeed, he wants us to open up way forward in this impasse. He wants us that we are not just shed light upon. He wants us that we are light. He doesn't just want to give us life, he wants us to give life. There where death seems to reign. This is why his blessing may look like a malediction. You need light only when the light is not enough. You need somebody to open up a way forward when you run the risk of falling up in the vacuum. This darkness that urges us to have light be shed from the bottom of ourselves is something that we hear echoed in the Benedictus by Zachary. And you, my child, will be called a prophet of the Most High, for you will go before the Lord to prepare the way for him, to give his people the knowledge of salvation through the forgiveness of their sins, because of the tender mercy of our God, by which the rising sun will come to us from heaven, to shine on those living in darkness and in the shadow of death. To go forward, to prepare the way is not being happy with the trodden path, but finding an unhoped for way forward thanks to faith. I'm not talking about a special taste for innovation. I'm talking about the very structure of the existence, about the Trinity structure, with the Son receiving itself from the Father to be with the Spirit. So the existence is not just the receiving, but also giving out. It's a gift of life, if opening up of a unique way forward. Hence, the signs that we are given are enough to push us forward, but do not outline any way forward, any specific way forward. As is true with Christopher Columb, we believe in the New World, but we don't have the maps. And our only compass is a cross. If we were not in such darkness, if everything would be clearly outlined, prepared, well, God would be perhaps less generous. We would be just a product of his work, and not the ones who cooperate to his work. Now, he wants us to be those who cooperate to his works. No doubt there are also other reasons for the present darkness, reasons that do not come from God, but rather from ourselves, from our evil will, from our weak intelligence, from the violence of our passions. But I meant to hint to that positive darkness that doesn't come from our failures, but that which is structural, that darkness the Creator could be charged with, and which in the end, indeed, we should pray him for. Just think for a minute. Think if we all would have the certainty of God as something that you plug in your ear and you can talk to him. Well, we would all be closed up in our bubbles. We wouldn't have the need to get in touch with our neighbors. We wouldn't have to believe in light and have it shed light during the darkness. God wants a certainty that we can cooperate to. He wants something that we can deploy in the vacuum of the future. In the desert, prepare the way for the Lord. Make straight in the wilderness a highway for our God. And then Isaiah again goes on, fall prostrate that we may walk over you. And then remember also what the Psalm of David, blessed are those whose strengths in you, who have set their hearts on pilgrimage. As they pass through the valley of Baca, they make it a place of springs. And this is indeed what I mean. We are in the valley of Baca, in the valley of tears, in the valley of thirst. We just look out and see desert and famine and angst. But this angst, this anxiety, is the sign that we're made for the joy of living. Because if we hadn't this joy ahead, then we wouldn't find this angst before death. And this famine, this drought, is the very sign that we're made to drill a hole till we find the source of water, till we find the spring. Because if we were not made for the spring, we wouldn't feel this thirst. This sign is a calling because we don't know, not only do we want that our thirst is quenched, but we also want ourselves to become one from the others, channels of the spring. Here's the immense certainty of existence. It is immense because it's piercing, and it asks us to go back, to go down, to go to those who are in the darkness, in the shadow of death. But now perhaps we could add another adjective to this certainty, not just inevitable and not just immense, but one third adjective that sums up what I wanted to talk to you about today, and that is apocalyptic. The certainty of existence is an apocalyptic certainty. The word apocalypse certainly implies also catastrophe, but it indeed means revelation. This is the heart certainty, the certainty that I see when I see vain hopes vanish. This is the certainty that is discovered once our life is freed from all the useless things, when there are as left behind all the ideologies, but what we're left with is something which is much more than having our dreams devastated. We found an immense certainty of an apocalypse, of revelation, i.e. the need for hope, hope that could help us go through the dark night, the need for a life which is called upon to be given more strongly than death. We have to have a fruitful life, opening up new paths in a way with no exit, showing glory through the cross, bringing about a revelation down to the heart of catastrophe. Thank you very much to you all.
dovremo trovare
we will have to find the time to reflect about this very rich text. I would like to thank Fabrice Hadjadj for his words. He has invited us to follow a line of thinking which is very demanding. But here the term certainty is becoming something which can really be touched. It's like something which is with substance. We go out here being more certain, more ourselves. So each one of us, while listening to the story of the good robber, well, you might have thought, well, that poor person, it's me. God never put us on the straight road. He never helps us to go along the straight way because he uses our turns, the fact that we go astray, that we deviate from the straight road, so that a new road is invented. The road, the single road for each one of us, which is typical of each one of us. When he concluded his presentation, I was reminded of the words of a great French person, the ones by Claudel and Anne Avercourt in an announcement to Mary. What's the purpose of life? He says in front of the dead daughter. He had visited the Holy Land. He came back alive, and she apparently was destined to a very linear existence. Then she dies to save her family and friends and the church. So what's the value of life? Life is valuable because it is there to be given. Why should we try to understand? It's so simple to obey. To obey to this existence, to this evidence. In the very moment in which I realize that my life is a gift, I realize that it's a tragedy at the same time. But we are not alone in this tragedy. So the very last mention to the substance of the word apocalypse, that means revelation, tells us that the person who started the human adventure within the life of Capharnaum, in that house where the fishermen is among us. So indeed, our journey, the journey of each one of us, in every step, is with him and becomes an immense certainty. So we thank again Fabrice Hadjadj very much. Thank you very much.